So men can be estrogen dominant too, and men can have the BRCA gene?
Yes, 100%. Getting into my 30s, I saw my personal health declining. I have an extruding disc in my lower back. My weight was going up. So I was organic, gluten-free, the sober-tober types of things, yet every single marker of my health was going in the wrong direction.
Welcome to the Rock Bottom Podcast, presented by Jigsaw Health, where we share health horror stories that inspire. Today's guest is Jeremy Malecha. Jeremy struggled for years with chronic back pain, inflammation, and unhealthy weight gain, despite living an active lifestyle. His journey back to health began through various lab tests that help uncover the root causes of his inflammation, and eventually help many others.
Before we dive in, just a quick note. As always, this podcast is for informational purposes only and is not a substitute for medical advice. So please always consult with a healthcare professional before making any changes to your health routine.
This is the Rock Bottom Podcast.
Jeremy, welcome to the Rock Bottom Podcast. It's so good to have you here. We got to see you in Scottsdale a couple of weeks ago at the Consumer Health Summit.
And it was all I could do to keep myself from asking about your story because I'm so excited to hear it. And I didn't want any spoilers.
I know, and it would have been great had we been able to get you in the studio, but time would not permit. So you're there in lovely San Diego, and we're going to get a chance to learn about you. So why don't you tell the audience who okay. We have to remember that we just recently gave the audience a name, and Ashley, you came up with the name.
No, I don't like it.
Okay.
Because it's the Rock Bottom Podcast. I was like, oh, bottom feeders, but that doesn't have a good ring to it.
Look at his reaction, though.
Unless we just make it a thing and we just everybody embrace it. We're all bottom feeders here.
Audience, what do you think? Are you okay being a bottom feeder? I thought it was hilarious.
We'll take a poll, and then on the next episode, we'll announce whether we are going to remain the bottom feeders or come up with something better.
Yeah.
What do you think, Jeremy?
Yeah, definitely. I'd stick with it. We try to definitely be controversial. Hopefully get more clicks.
That's right.
So go ahead and print the t-shirts is what you're saying.
But it's said in love, obviously. And we laughed for like 6 minutes afterwards. So it is. Okay. Rough start.
So take us back. We'd love to have you take us back to your rock bottom moment, the one that you're going to be talking about today. I know many people have multiple of those throughout a lifetime. And then we'll kind of talk about what led you there and then what got you to this point.
Yeah. So, my background was engineering. I started in a medical device company. Then I kind of rose through the ranks, right? So then I came over to a company called ResMed, S&P 500 company, and I was basically growing my career, right? So I was product management director and then was a VP. What my rock bottom moment came in was I've always been a health focused individual. So I spent, I was going to be an athletic trainer. I got into medical school. I decided not to, always reading books. I remember Eat to Win. I don't know if you remember that book from back in the late 90s. Men's Health put out a thing called the Complete Book of Abs. So I had all this stuff, and I'm working, and I've been, physically active, basketball, football, doing all kinds of things. And as I was really going through my career and getting into my 30s, I saw my personal health declining. So I was starting to have chronic back pain. So I was doing all the things, injections, neuroablation. I have an extruding disc in my lower back. And I was starting to, it was just progressively getting worse. My weight was going up. My blood pressure was going up throughout that individual process. And so what really happened was my wife, Jen, who I think is going to be on as well, was a practitioner. So we were doing all the things, right? So I was organic, gluten-free, the sober-tober types of things, yet every single marker of my health was going in the wrong direction. It all came to a peak in December of 2017. And I remember the day because I call it the worst day of my life. I stepped on my Withings scale and I still have it and I still use it in all of my marketing and stuff. I hit 240, right? So being 5'11 and a half-ish and seeing the 240, that was a really challenging moment for me, right? I call it the worst day of my life because one of the things is, you're doing things, you're investing in your health, you think you're doing everything right, and everything is going in the opposite direction.
I can't imagine. Yeah, that's the most frustrating thing ever because it's not like you were just being lazy and I just can't get motivated to work out or I just can't stop eating these potato chips or whatever. Like you're
Right.
genuinely doing everything that you know to be
Yeah.
healthy, and like it's just you're getting sabotaged somewhere.
Yeah. And so I was, we were running all the tests, stool microbiome, blood work. I was tracking all the stuff in an Excel spreadsheet. Obviously, I was tracking my weight, but I was doing activity trackers, high intensity interval training, or even like slower zone 2 training, and really nothing was working. And it was so frustrating because I was working so hard, yet everything was going in the wrong way. So that all changed. So Jen, who was my practitioner, had a consultation with one of the medical advisors from a company called Precision Analytical, or the Dutch test. It's a hormone test. And in that conversation, I had taken multiple tests, and he's like, well, has he ever gone low carb? Right. And we were like, huh? And we were like doing all the supplements for the detox pathways and DIM and all this updating dosage and everything else. And so all of a sudden I was like, oh, I didn't know that was a thing. So I was gluten-free organic, but I was still high carb. So things like rice, chips, corn, all this other stuff was really the problem. And then what happened is we just all of a sudden, that insight led to a cascade, which actually brought me back to where my health goals were. So what was interesting now looking backwards, we have all the information, was based upon my genetics, I'm what's called estrogen dominant. So I have a family history of breast cancer. So on the women's side, my grandma, my mom, both had breast cancer. There's a specific estrogen pathway called the BRCA gene that I have.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So that's crazy. Like, I think a lot of people might just think that is something only women have.
Right. That's exactly what I'm thinking in my head.
Right. Like, so men can be estrogen dominant too, and men can have the BRCA gene.
Yes, 100%. And so it's kind of a stigma thing, right? Because you think testosterone dudes, estrogen women, right?
Right.
But what really was happening with my genetic and my family genetic tree is, one, we do not deal with carbs very well. So my last name is Malecha, East European. My mom's maiden name is Fialka, Fyalka, which is also East European, right? And so if we think back to kind of the genetics and the evolutionary traits of what that looks like, rice is not a thing in Eastern Europe, right? And so as the generations kind of evolve and grow through, it was more around things like root vegetables. So I do well with underground carbohydrates. Above ground carbohydrates, think corn, rice, and everything else, I do not do well. And so what happens is, in my particular case, is I was still taking in those carbs. Those carbs then get stored as fat. And what's happened is fat then drives estrogen. And so because of my family history, where we're not good, what's called estrogen detoxers, we build up this accumulation. And so that's really what was happening to me, was I was basically filling the tank with all of this estrogen based upon the carbohydrates that I couldn't really process well and just stuffed into fat. And then I basically, as Dr. Carrie Jones always likes to say, my bathtub was plugged. So I'm filling the bathtub with a whole bunch of estrogen, and then I have no ability to actually detox that out. So you look at, you hear about the genetic components, MTHFR, Gary Brecka talks about that quite a bit. I have that, COMT. All of these things are basically around what's called methylation. And so in my particular case, the estrogens were coming in, and then I didn't have a good ability to support the ability to get rid of those estrogens. And so if you look at what is there's 4 different pathways. There's the 2-hydroxy, 4-hydroxy, and 16-hydroxy metabolites that come out when you detox. 4-hydroxy is the cancer-causing pathway, right? So when people talk about estrogen-driven cancers, that's the one you have to look for. I was off the chart in terms of that particular metabolite. And so that correlated with my genetics, my family history, and everything else. And so what I did was then I learned how to eat better, but then also actually do the right supplementation. And so that's where we started looking at what's called methyl donors, or supporting my underperforming methylation genetics by adding in methyl components. So that's things like choline, which comes from eggs, glutathione, N-acetylcysteine, and glycine. So giving myself the components, the building blocks, in a more supplementary way to actually start to detox that. And so where I went from was 1.1. You don't have to worry about the ranges, but 1.1 is very high, down to a 0.4. So I saw over a 60% reduction by, one, affecting my diet, and then also supporting that detox pathway. So what that meant for me as an individual is I immediately lost essentially 40 pounds in 3 months.
Wow.
Just by eliminating specific, like, did you eliminate all carbs or just the corn and the rice?
Yeah, so I
Phase
originally
one.
was very hardcore keto. The other
Okay.
the other insight that actually came in was if you go to a ketogenic diet, it's like creamer and butter in your coffee, and then you're focusing on beef.
Very high fat.
Turns out I actually have a reactivity to beef and cow milk, specifically from the US. So I had a good drop, and then I had a food sensitivity where I understood that. So then I switched over to more kind of pork, bison, elk, other types of proteins. And then I had another significant drop. So I
Okay.
had not only the component of getting through understanding where I was at from that dietary component, but I also had an inflammatory component. The funny part is once I got rid of those inflammatory foods for me, my back pain was gone.
Ah,
And I had
okay.
done,
So I have a question on the testing side of
yeah.
things. So what tests did you do to figure out that you had the BRCA gene and this estrogen dominant
Yeah, I
gene?
feel like we need to slowly unpack everything that you just
Yeah.
did. I took a whole bunch of notes, and I think the bottom feeders would like to get some
Yes.
details here.
I, for one, would like to know.
Yeah.
So
And look,
Starting with your, I guess your DNA testing. What
Yeah.
did you take for that?
Yeah, and look, this is why my business exists, is because of my individual journey, which is what worked for me will only work for me because I am a unique individual. And so, kind of foundationally is what is my genetics, right? Genetics doesn't necessarily mean what is going to happen. So just because you have the BRCA1, you're not necessarily going to have breast cancer. Just because ApoE4 doesn't mean you're going to have Alzheimer's. It means the potential of where that exists. So you have to kind of understand the blueprint of who you are and kind of where your potential and your limitations are from a genetic component. Then we had to look at my obviously comprehensive blood work. Everybody knows they can get it pretty cheap today. Advanced hormone testing, microbiome testing, and then food sensitivity. And that's really the foundational test layer that we do for each individual.
can you tell us what, like, if someone wants to get a genetic test to find out if they have those things, what did you use? What company?
So at the time it was 23andMe.
Oh, okay.
Hey, they used to be the only game in town.
The OG, yeah.
Yeah, it was not, this is 2017, so this is back before
Yeah.
23andMe issues existed and the privacy concerns. But any genetic testing company is going to give you and there's a lot of great ones out there. We work with MaxGen Labs. They're very kind of data privacy focused. There's 3x4 Genetics. It's a couple $100s, but they'll give you a very easy to understand view of kind of what those genetic potentials are.
Okay.
The nice thing about that test, you only do it once because your genes ain't changing.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then the other part is, so that's your potential. Then where's your metabolomics at today? So how do we understand what's actually happening to you? That is where the other testing comes in.
And that's when you learned what your 4-hydroxy metabolite levels were. You said it was a 1.1, which is off the charts.
Yep.
And what testing did you do for that? What was that one called?
So I have used a company called Precision Analytical. It's the Dutch test. They're kind of the market leader in the functional and integrative space. There's other urine-based hormone tests. One of the things that is really important to understand is that, yes, you can go do one of these 160 plus blood biomarkers, but it only tells you the estrogen or E2 value. It does not tell you how you're getting rid of it. And so that's
But the
really
Dutch
where
test does.
these urine-based are more comprehensive and give you a lot more insight as to how your whole hormone system is functioning rather than just one blood biomarker.
So do you recommend Dutch test over blood test just for overall hormone just assessment?
I recommend them complementary.
Okay.
So blood and urine are two different tools in the toolbox, and they give you two sets of information. And that's really where, thinking about this from a consumer standpoint, this is where kind of the overwhelm can come in. And so this is really why, the business that we built really focuses on helping providers give that information to the consumer so they can understand it in a digestible format.
Yes. The overwhelm is real.
Yeah. And I do want to come back to what you and Jen, your wife, work on together at Biocanic. But I want to ask maybe a sort of controversial question here. You
Mhm.
talked about like, you know, these blood panels that you can get that are kind of becoming the rage right now.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that? I think you somewhat alluded to it.
Well, so in fairness, I am a member of two of those platforms and have been for over 3 years. It's a
Okay.
great cost-effective way to get comprehensive blood work
Mm,
as a health-motivated consumer. I highly recommend it. You're never going to get it running through your insurance, your primary care provider. So we just need to set the expectation. If we want the information, that we can do it.
What are the two platforms that you subscribe to? Are you willing to share that?
Yeah. So I do Function Health. So I was
Okay.
one of the original beta users with them. So I'm in year 3 with them. And then there's a newer one called Superpower.
right.
Met the founders a long time ago. So I run them side by side. It's really, I do that one because even though they use the same lab testing provider, I'm curious just to see like how they interpret the data so I can better represent it to my friends and family that are also using them as well.
Interesting.
So if you are a consumer that like maybe can't afford both,
Yeah.
do you recommend one or the other?
Yeah, they're equivalently beneficial in different ways. Function gives you more markers. Superpower gives a better coaching experience and a kind of a human-human interaction that you can't get through Function. So it really depends on where you're at. Ultimately, like, let's say you get a whole bunch of information back. Most of my friends and family will upload it to Claude, and Claude's going to do some interpretation. The problem
Yep.
is AI doesn't have context. And so, really, that's why we're so focused on helping practitioners that are working with clients, right? So, okay, so you come back, your lipids are all out of whack, you've got high insulin, HbA1c. Now, somebody has to kind of look at that through the context of who you are, right? So, what's your sleep pattern look like? How are you working out? What's your family stress look like? Are you living in a moldy home? All of these other things the context is actually more important than just the data itself. The data
Yeah.
gives you that opportunity to say, hey, look, I've got some areas that are kind of giving me yellow and red lights here, but now what do I do about it? Has to have that kind of human in the loop or in real life
Absolutely.
component.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think to a guy I know that's like, yeah, just sign up for Function and I'm just running the results through Claude.
Yeah.
Um, did you get a chance, and maybe we're kind of going out in
Mhm.
left field here, but at CHS there was an interesting presentation from Onyx
Yeah.
Life, I think it
Yeah.
was, that's like sort of specialized AI. I'm curious if you knew about that, have looked into that, and maybe we're getting far afield here, but
Yeah. No, so for the people that don't know, AI is the ability for a practitioner who has built a lot of education and research in a certain area to kind of create their own avatar. So I think
yeah,
Dr. Jeff Bland was a perfect example where they've
yep,
taken all of his information and they created around him. It's an interesting approach, and I think it can be useful, but kind of, taking a step back. So I worked at ResMed, which is a sleep apnea company. And sleep apnea, obstructive sleep apnea, every hopefully knows it's a CPAP device. It's, kind of challenging. So the thing about CPAP therapy is the only way you can ever hurt an individual by putting them on CPAP therapy is by hitting them over the head with the device. There is no risk. And one of the things that we tried for a very long time was, well, if that's the case, why don't we just test people and put them onto therapy, and we can have this whole digital pathway where we can get a whole bunch of consumers onto sleep therapy. That never worked. And
hmm,
the reason is health is a lot different than your consumer products,
hmm,
right? So, yes, I can go buy the new MacBook Air because I get sold and everything else. When somebody gets diagnosed or has concerns about their health that's so personal, they want to talk to somebody about it.
yeah,
I have questions, right? I'm not just going to accept that this therapy I'm going to go on to this therapy, I'm going to be fine. I want to, well, what does this mean? If I do this, what are the benefits I'm going to see? What are the risks? How do I clean it? All of these things come
Mm-hmm.
in. So back to the Onyx.ai component, it's a great way to serve education, but ultimately health is so personal, there still has to be some sort of human contact, right? So establish the relationship, build the trust that your approach, thinking, and methodology is going to work for me. Ask those questions, and then yes, that AI can kind of fill in the gaps along the way, but there's still that part that has to start with that human to human interaction.
And also, having blind trust with AI is a complete and utter mistake because it is hallucinating. It is wrong a lot of the time. I've experienced some really interesting hallucinations with my personal AI about my health, which I know are like grossly wrong. And I'm
Yeah.
like, well, I wonder like how people that like don't have a knowledge base hardly at all about things, and they're just literally throwing stuff in there and just taking it as gospel. Like, how many lives is this actually ruining right now?
It
It's a
was
big concern.
it was the best of times. It was the worst of times.
It's funny if anybody's familiar with the Gartner hype cycle, we're like in peak AI hype, right? And so I'm sure you guys have seen, just being around everybody at CHS, this AI doc in your pocket. AI is we've got this new AI. LabCorp's got AI. I think Quest has AI now. Everybody's got an AI thing. But if you actually look at consumer polling around the perceptions around AI, nobody likes it. Nobody likes it, right? So in some ways, I think we're kind of breathing into the mirror here, and it's kind of fogging our view as to what the actual people in the world actually want to see from an experiential perspective.
I was watching a little report on YouTube last night about ex-CEO of Google speaking at University of Arizona graduation ceremony, and he brought up AI, and the crowd booed him. And he was kind of like, wait, maybe I'm speaking to the wrong audience here.
Yeah. I was at a graduation. I was at Carnegie Mellon. My niece just graduated from there, and Jensen Huang was the keynote speaker at the commencement. And it was funny. Jen and I were sitting there. It was super interesting. I mean, it's the most valuable company CEO. We were like super interested to hear what he had to say. They recruit out of Carnegie Mellon for their engineering. And I talked to my niece about it, and they're like, oh yeah, we hated it. It was just an advertisement for AI. They just, I think that school just doesn't boo people, but they were not impressed.
So interesting. Well, okay, I want to get back to your health story. I feel like this is becoming the
little bit of a
rock
rabbit
bottom
trail.
AI podcast or something.
Yeah.
I want to go back to some of your health markers that you mentioned, the COMT and the MTHFR, because I think our audience are probably a decent amount of people that have not heard those before or don't know what they are.
Yeah.
Can you explain those to us?
So MTHFR is a gene which is how your body does methylation. So methylation is kind of the cleanup crew where it
The
comes through
detox system,
the
right?
detox approach, right? So it's basically taking a methyl group, adding it to it so that your body identifies it such that you excrete it out the way in a very broad, very simplified way. When you have the genetic SNPs, whether you're heterozygous, meaning one copy, or homozygous, two copies of the mutation, it will reduce the amount of your ability to actually add that methyl group. So I think if you're heterozygous, you have a 30% reduction. If you're homozygous, it's 70% reduction in methylation.
Okay, so if you have MTHFR, you either have one of the two of those.
If you have the SNP, the mutation in the SNP. If you don't have the mutation, then it's fully functional.
Okay.
Yeah. So then COMT is a similar one. It's more typically associated with like neuroinflammation or neural approaches. So generally, like, I'm more A-type, higher energy, but also more susceptible to things like anxiety, ruminations and everything. And so part of that is now, how do I actually help on the neurotransmitter side support that mutation with supplementation as well?
Okay, so let's talk about both of those things and what you're actually doing to like mitigate those things or to support those things.
Yeah. So back on the MTHFR side, I do what's called, so there's a couple different ways. So you can do glutathione, which is essentially a methyl donor. There's also what's called N-acetylcysteine or NAC plus glycine, which are the building blocks for methyl groups. So I do both of those depending on what I have available. There's a lot of great products out there. Then I also do focus a lot on eggs because of choline, which is also a methyl donor as well. So that's kind of like one of my staples for my dietary approach. So that's been helping me on the hormonal detox side.
Is there anything people need to stay away from in particular with the MTHFR and food wise?
No, I mean, it's one of those things that it's really important to kind of, I don't know what happened to it, but remember the Whole30 diet,
Yeah.
Yeah.
right? The Whole30 diet was essentially a massive elimination diet. And
Yeah.
then you reintroduce things trying to understand what's working for you and what's not. So in the same vein of doing that, it's not just a genetics and a food connection, it's a genetics, a food, a microbiome connection, all these other things. And so if you are having health issues, you're having concerns, you're dealing with anxiety or gas, pain, and bloating after eating, all this other stuff, is to really start to think about and measure what you're eating and how you're doing things. From a nutraceutical perspective, there really isn't anything you have to worry about, because it's either going to work or it's not, right?
Mhm.
And you can't really, there are certain things that you can, do too much on, but
Your body will tell
general,
you.
your body's just going to eliminate it, right?
Yeah.
If it's not going to use it.
What about B vitamins for people with MTHFR?
Yes.
What's the
So,
connection there?
yes. So and again, not showing up on the urine-based hormone test, but on my blood biomarkers, I've elevated homocysteine. Homocysteine is very highly associated with cardiovascular disease. So my typical homocysteine, like the top end of the range, is like 10. So I'm normally at like an 11 or 12. And so I do take a methylated B vitamin. So there's a lot of different great products out there. And so when I am compliant on that, my homocysteine comes down below 10. And then when I run out and I forget to reorder and I retest, it goes back up over 10. And so those are one of those things where you can see a direct causal relationship on that component as well.
Well, I'd be remiss to not mention, have you ever tried the Jigsaw activated B with SRT?
I have not.
I should send you some. The whole concept for that, my dad is MTHFR, and he was like, okay, well, I need to take like the methylated versions, the active forms of B vitamins, but you don't store B vitamins.
Yep.
So you kind of get a high dose and then you pee them out. And he's like, well, if we did the sustained release technology like we do with the MAG SRT, I think it would help me to lower my homocysteine. So that's been in our product lineup for, 21 years.
It was one of the originals.
It was one of the original formulas. So my friend will send you some of those. I'd be interested to see your results. It's very simple. It's, one pill, tons of methylated Bs, and it breaks down over, I think, 6 hours, 8 hours.
Right. And as anybody knows, if it doesn't have the time release technology, you take it in the morning and then your pee is orange.
Yes.
Correct.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And going back to your body will use what it'll use, then I've probably taken too much, right? Because now the orange pee is indicating that I've kind of OD'd on it.
Yeah. The most common thing I hear when I give my friends activated B is, am I going to be okay? Because it's a very high dose of all the B vitamins. And I always tell them, if you're not seeing that, I would be surprised, because there's so much of the vitamins in there. You almost, it's like overfilling you probably. Most people that take that product tend to stay on it and reorder it. So,
in one of those things like MTHFR, I think the population prevalence is well over 50% that you're at least heterozygous. So it's like that should be like one of those core products that is just in everybody's general supplement regimen.
I'd actually kind of like to go back to the scale when you saw 240 on the scale. How long had it been sort of building up to that, where you were like, all right, I got to do something? And why was that? Why was that the number? Why was that the moment? I guess take us to the scale.
Yeah, it was. So I think most people will see their weight go up a couple pounds a year, maybe 5. There's, sometimes, there's variability, there's water weight, cycling females, certainly there's going to be variability, but it's like, it just kind of goes like this. What was interesting about 2017 was that it wasn't like the 2 to 5 pounds in the year. It was 10 to 20 in that year.
Yeah.
So I had been probably floating at 220, and then getting to 240 by the end of the year was a huge change. Right. And then you could viscerally feel it. Right. Because, a lot of times people say, don't focus on the scale, focus on the, how you feel in your body, because muscle weight and all this other stuff. I had to get a new wardrobe. Right. And that is the telltale sign, because it's not only is it, you're you can gloss over it on the scale on the number, but when you actually have to go change and get different clothes, that's really what hits you so hard from a confidence perspective. The
Sure.
flip side is when you lose a whole bunch of weight, you have to buy a whole bunch of new clothes now too. So that side of
But
it
it's more
feels
fun.
that feels more fun, right? So
Yeah.
instead of buying, jeans with a 38 waist, you're like, well, I don't have any jeans that fit anymore, so now I have to buy them at a 34, which is, something that,
Yeah.
is also flip side that also makes you a lot more confident.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
And you said you did it almost in the course of 4 months. Did you say you lost 40 pounds?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's fast.
That is very fast. I'm curious, during that time, I want to go back to you when you discovered then a beef allergy.
Yeah.
What were the symptoms that you found to discover that? Because that seems like a really important part of the story.
Yeah. So there was so there's a couple different ways that you can look at food sensitivity testing. There's what's called IgG or immunoglobulin testing. There's a different test that's called a mediator release test that actually it's a blood draw, and they inject the all the proteins into the different blood samples, and they measure the inflammatory response. So it's a little bit different in that respect. What was super interesting was that there's red, yellow, and green, right? So green's good, yellow, we'll kind of see, and there was red, and it was shellfish, which I don't know why. I wasn't really eating much of that anyway, but it was beef, corn, and rice, right? And so those were like the key functions. What's really crazy was, I think it's specific to US beef, maybe the grass-fed component, the glyphosate component, maybe something along those lines. If I travel abroad, I don't really have the same issues. What was really interesting is, look, if I go to Austin, Texas, I'm eating the brisket, right? So we would go, there was a conference called Paleo Effects at the time. And so we were there, and I know that I'm like, look, I'm going to go back, I'm going to eat beef. Back pain comes back for 48 hours. 2 days later, I have a 5-pound increase. And then 2 days later, 5 pounds comes off. And so what was happening is my body's reaction. So I'm going water retentive, the neuroinflammation comes up, and then and then I take it out of my system, and then my body actually is able to pass that on. And I did that, and you could see it multiple times.
Wow.
Right.
That's incredible.
And so Jen and I always jokingly talk about like different foods, and we call it, is it worth it? Right.
Right. Sometimes it is.
Right. So sometimes I generally eat gluten-free, but sometimes there's just, a restaurant that has their own sourdough starter 7-day, and it's like a grass-fed butter with all this different flavoring. We're like, okay, it's worth it. I'm going to take the pain knowing that I'm going to pay for it tomorrow because I know it's worth it. Right.
And when you eat that way versus, let's just say you went to, In-N-Out and had like the bun and all the things, like versus, the high quality sourdough grass-fed butter, do you notice less of a reaction when you eat that?
Oh yeah, certainly.
I would imagine.
I would jokingly say, like for In-N-Out or going and getting, pizza from the local pizza shop, I would jokingly say I might as well just eat it in the bathroom.
That's really funny.
Yeah.
That's
So
gonna be
really,
fun.
when you get those, highly enriched, gluten, you can kind of see, if you've ever been to a pizza shop, they'll have the bags and it says like gluten enriched flour type of thing.
Oh yeah.
And
The
so,
more gluten, the better.
yeah. And also my skin breaks out, so I'll get zits. So I know if I've been exposed or not. So, they're always like right here around my nose.
God, it doesn't sound worth it.
Yeah.
Well, is it worth it? At least ask the question. At least you know what you're.
Sounds like more trips to Europe are in order.
Oh my
Yeah,
goodness, yeah.
definitely.
Have you
But,
been to Italy? A number of people on the podcast have talked about, and you feel like you hear it a lot. I went to Italy and I ate all the pizza there and walked around and drank the wine and didn't have any of the breakouts and the reactions that I have. Do you have any experience like that to share?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's a function of the food supply that we built in the U.S. market, right?
Mhm.
So in Europe, this may be old, but in general, like the stat was something like Americans will spend 5% of their income on food, whereas in Europe they'll spend 20%. So there's a
Wow.
higher expectation for higher quality food in Europe. The other side of this is in the US, they have, they use dwarf grain, so it's faster growing, higher gluten. In the European market, instead of doing the fast sourdough starters like you would see in typical US sourdough bread, they're actually doing the 72-hour fermentation process. That fermentation process, the gluten and gliadin proteins are actually broken down by the bacteria that's creating it. So if you don't do the fast process, it actually removes a lot of that out there. And so that's why you kind of see a lot of that. We did a study on pediatric autism with a group out of Chicago and Purdue University, and they did a whole bunch of food testing and testing. So we only found out about this afterwards. So the kids were eating US-based processed food, and then they went on to basically a 6-week organic, non-processed food diet. They did mold and mycotoxin testing. Every single kid was elevated for what's called ochratoxin A. Ochratoxin A is a food mycotoxin that exists largely in grains. When they went on to an organic diet, all of the ochratoxin A came down, their behavioral scores, it's neuroinflammatory, so the kids actually did a lot better just by eliminating it. So then they brought the data to the farm and ag groups, and they were like, oh yeah, well, what we do is when you go to an auction to buy grain, we test it for ochratoxin A. If it's above the threshold for ochratoxin A, what do you think they do?
Ship it to America.
No, they mix in clean grain until it gets below the threshold, and then they sell it, and that's when it ends up in your cornflakes.
Gee.
That's just so upside down.
Yeah. And so, like we can look across like a lot of data within our system, and everybody, like I had friends, I just ran their total tox burden, and she was super elevated for ochratoxin A, and I'm like, you got to fix your food sources. It's not hard.
So
but it is
on that note, let's talk about it. So you just said grains are one of the bigger contributors. We know through our own research that coffee is one of the biggest contributors.
Yep.
I did a mycotoxin test and had like 4 different types of very highly elevated for mold. It must have been ochratoxin A. I don't recall right off the top of my head. Maybe you do. But so I sent me down the rabbit hole to find clean coffee. Ultimately ended up doing our own clean coffee because then we know we could send it in for third-party testing to make sure it really is free of mold, mycotoxins, heavy metals. So that's where Firefly Coffee came from. But I am curious where...
And the whole documentary, the Breaking Big Food documentary, was about the American food supply and how it's gotten so rotten.
Yeah.
So what are some of the other things besides grains and coffee that people need to be looking out for?
Peanut butter.
Peanut butter. Yes.
Peanuts are inherently moldy.
Yeah.
Peanuts and like cashews, right?
Yeah, I believe so. But peanuts, I mean, they're a legume. They're underground. They're they're grown underground in essentially a moldy environment. And so there are a few kind of peanut butter people online, but if you're looking at like Skippy or any of the kind of the traditional processed foods, not only is it packed with sugar, it's a free-for-all when it comes to mold and mycotoxins.
Okay. Good to know.
Yeah.
So if you're going to do peanut butter, get the good stuff, make sure it's organic, spend the extra money to get quality.
And third-party tested, just like your coffee.
So there are peanut butter brands that have third-party testing. Oh, that's great to know.
You can just search mold-free peanut butter, and there's quite a few different ones. They have a lot of different flavors and stuff like that. It's also low sugar too, which is always nice.
Great to know. And then also like dried fruit can be a culprit too.
Yeah, definitely.
So
although I don't know why you would want to eat dried fruit.
Like, I know the fresh stuff is so good.
Fructose and sugar, like what's the point?
I don't know, man. Like dried mangoes, ooh, those can be really yummy.
That's true. So yes, each to their own, but really I think it all comes down to, again, like education and knowing yourself and your body and like everybody needs. Knowledge is power, right? In this specifically in this, because we are not just like a one size fits all. And a lot of the medical system, even the naturopathic side, is a very one size fits all system. Here are, one set of standard tests that we have everyone do, and then we make all of our decisions based on that. Well, guess what? Those standard tests don't include like 80% of what you just said you had to find out to actually solve your problem.
Yeah, I mean, the most important, with the pandemic, there's very, don't It was actually the best thing that ever happened to us, even though it's kind
Mhm.
of painful to say right now,
Sure.
because what it shine a light on to the broader consumer world is the only person that cares about and is willing to do something about my health is me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I jokingly call it the Joe Rogan effect. He's talking about testing and food and diet and all this other information, Huberman, all the people that are now shining a light on the important component. And I think the pandemic, what it did is it shifted the mindset for consumers to go like, look, I need to if I want to do and be the person that I want to be, run around with the grandkids when I'm 70 years old. I want to be able to coach and compete and do all these other things, have a great golf score when I'm 65 and retired. I have to take control of my health. And I think that's what's really exciting. I was concerned that we were going to fall back into the 5 for $5.99 at Applebee's. And I feel like the consumer world is now like, look, we're doing a lot more things. Yes, I could do a GLP-1, but that's not the only thing. So really, getting high quality supplements, getting an understanding of diet, where things are, getting a better understanding of what's going on with me, getting more educated, online education, the democratization of personalized health is what's really exciting today.
Yes, it is exciting. You can feel the shift. You can, you know, uh, like people are talking about it more than ever and educating themselves, and it is super encouraging.
100%.
On that note, let's talk a little bit about what you and your wife Jen have created.
Yeah. So through my experience where I had all of those different test reports, I jokingly at one point was like, she was telling me to buy this bottle of supplements for $70. And I was like, why? And she's like, don't you remember on page 4 of your microbiome test, you had candida and decreased elastase or something? I was like, I don't even know which one that is,
Yeah.
let alone everything else. And so my background being in electronic medical records, mainly in the post-acute care space. So think about skilled nursing facilities, home health, durable medical equipment. What I saw was Jen struggling with trying to use what is the traditional healthcare model and not having the right technology in place. And so what we did is we founded Biocanic, which is built around kind of this individualized approach to health. And the way we think about it is not the consumer function health side. It's really about empowering a provider to be efficient so that they can see more patients more effectively.
Mm.
Yeah.
And so if you think about an individual provider and they're running those 5 tests, they have to synthesize and think through all of that. They have the intake form, the context, maybe wearable tracking, education, diet, meal planning. All of this prevents them from scaling. And unlike the traditional healthcare model where you just kind of show up and leave with a prescription, they're working with people over time. And so this time burden builds up and then they can't scale and see more people.
Mm-hmm.
And so our focus from a technology side was like, hey, how do we take what's needed from the medical documentation side and actually make it work for this health model? And so that's what we built. We called it a health intelligence platform. It's funny, now everybody uses the term health intelligence, but that was trademarked.
Thanks.
2022. We're really excited. We keep building around this. We've just a lot of great momentum. Now we have the kind of the AI component as well, not customer facing AI, but hey, how do we help that provider pull all of those data points together? Look at the genetics, the hormones, the blood chemistry, and give the provider a starting point. So it's such that they're really focused on the one-on-one care and then just tailoring it for that individual. And so
Brilliant.
that's what's really exciting today.
So for you, you don't work directly with individuals, you work with providers and you give them sort of the platform, the health intelligence system to treat their patients more effectively. Do those practitioners have to use the tests that you guys work with? Okay.
No, we're 100% agnostic, and we
Okay.
know that our providers are going to use different tests for different
Yeah.
reasons. So,
Yeah.
we have Tracy Gappin, who you met at Consumer Health. He's a health optimization focusing on hormone replacement therapy, gut health, genetic coaching. So he's going to use a different set of tests than Jen, who's a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner, who's using a different set. So we're
Yeah.
agnostic. And then more importantly, there's always new stuff coming into the market. The nice thing about the personalized health space is those new kind of tools, techniques, applications, a lot of them we met at Consumer Health Summit. We want to be able to support that immediately, right? So
Yeah.
if somebody comes in, they have this really cool mitochondrial testing and they can see improvements in mitochondrial function. We want to be able to put that out there without having to keep them locked into a single testing set.
Yeah. And how could, I guess, bottom feeders, I'm just starting to use it now.
Yeah.
How could our bottom feeders follow you online, and or could they find a practitioner that utilizes your platform because they feel like, I want to go to a practitioner that has your added benefits, your
Because really that creates a more personalized experience versus you just don't get the TLC or like the attention to all of the different details necessarily with a doctor that like has too much on their plate and it has a bottleneck essentially.
Yeah. So we have over 2,000 active providers today. We do make available. So if a consumer comes to us and says, hey, yes, I want to go work with a provider, what we do is we provide them a set of options. So think of it as like a Yelp for functional and integrative through our kind of vetted provider network. It really depends on the individual. So if that, the person says, hey, my son is having IBD, IBS and neuroinflammation, then we're like, okay, here are the 3 people that we would recommend that specialize in that niche. Go follow them, go learn about them and find the one. And the most important thing that we always say is, we don't want to just point you at this person. You need to find the person that you're going to resonate with.
Yeah.
Right?
Sure.
So do they speak your language? Do you connect with them? Do you really feel like you have that kind of accountability? Because if you go and hire somebody that you hate, you're not going to do the work and you're just going to waste the money. So we always say, check out their podcast, follow their Instagram, sign up for their newsletter. And I think Jen uses the stat somewhat. It's usually about 3 months where people will follow her because they're following and learning and seeing the posts. And we always encourage the consumers to do that as well. There is a lot of information out there. The explosion and the number of personalized health, functional, integrative, Ayurvedic, longevity, you name it. There's a lot more competition out there. So there's a lot more people fighting for eyeballs. So it is really important for the consumer to be very thoughtful in who they want to work with and not just jump at the first opportunity.
So how should the bottom feeders get in touch with you, Jeremy?
Just come to our website. It's Biocanic, BIOCANIC.com. Just drop us a note, hit us up on the contact us form, and we'll get you all squared away. And then, awesome. Of course, we're at Biocanic on all the socials.
Yeah, right.
Thank you for all the work that you guys are doing to help make the healthcare experience better for consumers. It's such a need, and Godspeed.
And it's probably a part that isn't really thought about from most practitioners. They think, or I'm sorry, from most consumers, where they think about like, okay, well, a practitioner, they went to medical school, they've got their stethoscope, now they're going to treat me. Well, there's a whole underlying support and technology system that will kind of make or break a practitioner. So really, Jeremy, what you and Jen, your wife, are doing is radically transforming the health in America. And thankfully, because of the Joe Rogan effect, because of the COVID effect, because of the waking up of so many millions of Americans to realize our food is poisoned.
Yep.
I have to take control of my own healthcare. Because of all those tailwinds, I hope that you guys are seeing a lot of growth, and that the practitioners that you support are also seeing a lot of growth.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really great time because now there is so much more awareness, and now that people really understand big pharma, big food, just like you guys kind of laid out in the documentary, and exactly how the incentives are working in those spaces. Now people are really like aware and now motivated to go take control of their health for themselves. And I think that's what's really exciting, and really we're here to help enable the practitioners, to help give them the tools to kind of, be healthy and get to their own individual health goals.
Amen to that. Well, thank you so much, Jeremy. It's been a pleasure to hear your story. And we look forward to having an episode with your wife, Jen, here very shortly.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks for having me on. Really appreciate it.
This episode of the Rock Bottom Podcast is brought to you by Jigsaw Health, a family-owned, Arizona-based nutritional supplement company. Every formula is made with clean ingredients that are third-party tested to ensure that what's on the label is in the bottle and nothing else. Learn more at jigsawhealth.com.
Do you have a health horror story? We're always looking for stories that will inspire others, so please use the link in the description to apply to be on our show. Finally, if this episode resonated with you, then please like and subscribe. It really helps others to find our show, and we want to help spread the word. New episodes drop every other Wednesday, So thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next show.